Welcome to VVork. This is the continuation of a video series in which we're discussing containers, Docker, Kubernetes, PKS, and more with Marc Alumbaugh. In this video, Marc will discuss the relationship between Docker and Kubernetes. Let's get started.
So when you look at that, what does it actually look like at the end of the day? At the end of the day, what it looks like is you're going to see this particular product referred to as Docker. Docker is a very popular container solution. And what it gives is it gives the developers a platform where they could package up their application and its application dependencies into this container package that we could then run. We could easily scale it. If instead of making a larger virtual machine, we just add multiple of something. So it looks something like this. Maybe I need 2 web front ends. Maybe I need a load balancer that's going to get me into the front end. Maybe I need a database that's going to be my back end where I persist my data. As your developers are going through doing this, they could develop on their laptop. Okay, so they could be developing anywhere they need to, and at the end, they're going to spit out a box to us to say, okay, here's the sum of my pieces. This represents my app. What this typically looks like over here, I'll draw an analogy to you. It looks a little bit like running Workstation or Fusion to run a VM. In fact, on Workstation or Fusion, I could run 3 or 4 VMs. The problem is this is not very enterprise grade, okay? It's a manual process. It has no fault tolerance, and it's going to be a lot harder for me to coordinate scaling and upgrades. So Docker is the solution that gets us part of the way there. What are we missing? Is we're missing some way to do orchestration. We need a way to have something to orchestrate those 4 containers, let's say in this case. So what that solution that the industry is standardized on is Kubernetes.
So, Marc, if I can interject a little question or comment here, a lot of the VVork audience comes to VVork for videos on vRealize Orchestrator. Are we talking about vRealize Orchestrator here, or what is this?
Nope. It is an orchestrator, but it's an orchestrator for containers. So that's what Kubernetes is doing, and let me show you what I mean. This application we had over here on the left, if I back up a little bit, let me back up a little bit. You notice my business app, the green box here, my business app is comprised of actually 4 containers. 2 web containers, 1 load balancer container, and another container that runs my database. What the Kubernetes orchestration is doing is Kubernetes consists of first this thing called the Kubernetes cluster. And I'll explain to you what is a cluster in a few more slides. Once I have my Kubernetes cluster, instead, I'm going to make up a single file. And that single file of Kubernetes is typically it's a YAML file. And this YAML file is saying the business app way over here is comprised of 4 containers. And inside Kubernetes, the platform of Kubernetes, we have the equivalent of something that looks like DRS. If I'm going to start a new VM, what does DRS do? Well, if DRS is in partially automated or fully automated mode, if I power on a VM, DRS is going to look and say, which host has the least amount of utilization? Where should I start this particular VM at? Kubernetes has the same thing. It's got this thing called the scheduler. And it's going to go off and find somewhere in this Kubernetes cluster, not to be confused with the vSphere cluster, which node should I run this container on? So what's happening inside Kubernetes, which is a bit different than how Orchestrator works, is it's doing scheduling of what? A container. Now that scheduling could be start it and run it forever, or it could also be at 2 a.m. each day, I need a particular container job to run to do something. So via Kubernetes, we can run our container solutions, and Docker is just one runtime. We could also be using something like Rocket as our container runtime. This Kubernetes solution is available for you on numerous public clouds. So it's not a VMware solution. It's actually an open source solution that originated originally out of Google, okay? And it's available on multiple people's platform. You could have a Kubernetes platform to run your container solutions on Google Cloud. You can do it on Amazon. Azure's got a solution. VMware's got a solution. You could do it as a hybrid solution. You could do it in an in-house solution. There's multiple different ways you could run a Kubernetes cluster. So when you look at what is Kubernetes, as I said to you, it's this open source system. And it's designed for automating the deployment and the scaling and the management of containerized applications. The major features, as you can see inside here, is I need to deploy an application. I need it predictably deployed. I know based upon certain characteristics how it's going to get deployed. I need to potentially to be able to scale my application on the fly. Maybe my 2 web servers aren't enough. Maybe I need a 3rd or a 4th. I need to be able to roll out new features. If my new web server that I've deployed, suddenly I find a bug into it, or maybe there's an enhancement that needs to be done, how can I easily roll out a new version of one of these individual micro containers? It needs to be able to understand the use of the hardware where your container is actually running on. Okay, guys, a container is still an application. It needs CPU and RAM and networking and disk to function. So how do we optimize the use of that? And then importantly, how do we restart, replace, and reschedule containers? Ultimately, this container is running somewhere, either bare metal or on top of a virtual machine. If the bare metal or the virtual machine where it's running on dies for whatever reason, Kubernetes is the thing that's going to be sensing that something went down and I need to restart it or reschedule it somewhere. So in some cases down here, this looks a lot like, if you know vSphere, high availability.
In the next video, Marc will dive deeper into Kubernetes, Kubernetes clusters, Kubernetes nodes, kubelets, and YAML. Join us in the next video to learn more.